Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. I apologize for the gap between the previous video and this one. I hope you didn't miss me too much. This is... that sounds so cheesy. Really what's happening is Jay and I are coming up with storyboards, we're coming up with character designs. He's got a script, fantastic script, and this little video is how the storyboard went. So I'll show you what will the storyboard will be. I'll just kind of make a time lapse of all of the storyboard, and you can actually see the full live storyboard properly the way it was intended on the Patreon. So please please do join Patreon/Midnight Comics. Any tier will allow you access to the storyboard version. Do remember that the storyboard version is not the final version. The final version will come out on Patreon, and we're aiming to get this done ASAP because the competition deadline is looming very, very quickly. So with that in mind, we are going to try and get the competition, well, we're going to try and make it to the competition. Now, you will eventually get the full version of it if it doesn't break any copyright laws, or depending on what happens with the competition, but it will be after the results for the competition have been announced. If you will get it at all, I'll be very frank with you, I don't know. For now though, you do have access to the storyboard version, which again is not the final version, but it gives you the gist of the story and how the panels and everything are laid out. So without further ado, here is what we did for the storyboard. So as you can see, I am laying everything out. So I just want to go through a little bit here and there for anyone thinking of working in comics or working in manga, or wanting to storyboard their own story in any kind of shape or form. You will normally have a script. Now typically it works like someone hands you the script if you were just the artist, or on occasion like I am doing for Bounty, you can write your own script. And there's a difference here. If you think about it, like you're making a movie, the director has an idea in his head as to what the movie is going to look like. The scriptwriter is going to have an idea in their head as to what it's going to look like. The VFX artists or the CGI artists are going to have an idea of what everything's going to look like and what's possible. Everybody has their own idea of what is actually possible, what it's going to look like in the end, and all of these things will ultimately combine to the best of their ability to make the overall film. Now this is why you have, for example, directors or visual effects directors or script directors and things like that, so they can kind of work together and encompass everything. When it comes to comic books, there's not much difference. There you will have someone who's overseeing the project, whether that's the author themselves or the person who's producing it, or even the artist, and most of the time it will be their idea. So with this script, for example, Jay gave an idea of what he thought every individual panel would look like. He thought what he understood to be the pacing of it, how he understood it to have the most impact. That was in his head. But when it came to the art side of stuff, it didn't quite work in the same way. Sometimes he would have one panel to describe too many actions, and I would have to change that here and there. But again, nothing was done on my own. Jay had to improve everything. He was ultimately in charge of the project, and it's his story, so I wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. When I showed him the pages, he agreed to it. It wasn't just I'll just do this and hope that everything will work out in the end. That's not how it works. As you're doing a collaboration, you're trying to work with people. It means that you have to acknowledge how their vision is, or what you try and mimic what their vision is, but do it in a way that works more practically. So that's what happened here. So with every single one of these panels, for the most part, there was Jay's story. There was occasional ones here and there that I would extend or cut or change even some of the dialogue here and there, because Jay and I had thought about it, we talked it through, we discussed what would work, what wouldn't work. He would often join me when I'm doing these sessions, and we both came up with the best possible outcome for it, or what we believed is the best possible outcome for it. So that's kind of the first thing you have to keep in mind when you're doing storyboarding, is that it's not just you, but it's everybody involved in this project. The next thing that you should try and keep in mind is the first thing that people are going to see is are the words, are the lettering, really. So you need to place your bubbles, speech bubbles typically, in such a way that it allows for the eye to flow in the direction that you want the page to go in. And that's really important. This is something that I learned, obviously working quite heavily in comics and manga and things like that. But also, I did a course on making manga by Kenny Ruiz, who honestly phenomenal artist. He does loads of things like Team Phoenix, so definitely do check him out. He really did help when it came to this stuff. But anyway, the point is, when you're doing it, you follow the most important thing would be the dialogue and the script. The pictures are second, and even then, the pictures need to follow the page. So if you're looking, for example, I will draw a panel, and I'll maybe swap the direction of it so that the eye line goes down instead, or goes up, or leads to the next panel. The very first thing you tend to see when you see a face, is the eyes. So keep that in mind. No matter which, who you're doing, it's the eyes that people tend to latch onto. Now, I didn't necessarily, follow these two rules in that order. Sometimes it works better if you draw the picture and then you do the dialogue on top of that. Sometimes, but it tends to be that if you do the dialogue first, get an idea of where the dialogue is, then you can show the direction that the page should go, and that actually will inform your overall page as in direction of where everything is going to be facing and where everything is going to go. So that was the next thing to keep in mind, is that the images are the second part, and the eye line tends to focus on where you should go, or where the reader's eye will follow on that page. So just things to keep in mind. Next, when you are storyboarding, it is not the be-all end-all of that page. Your storyboarding is very rough. It is not going to be the final product. So whenever you are making a storyboard, it doesn't have to be super detailed. Now, bear this in mind though, certain people, especially people who've been working in the manga industry or comic book industry for a long time, they may have a lot of detail and description in their lines when they are just doing the storyboards, and that's come from a couple of things. One, they could have done it for such a long time that that's how they work now. Or two, they want to show a better idea of what the final image will look like. So it depends on obviously what it is. The panels, for example, the previous page that you just saw, or even this page that you saw, what I am doing is I am creating a very descriptive idea of positions of characters and what the facial expressions are going to look like. But for the most part, I'm doing very basic images. Most of this is just kind of sketches. There's nothing huge in it. There are, you can see the emotion on the faces, and that's pretty much it. So when you are storyboarding, when you're actually drawing out your pages, having the emotional expressions, they need to be very obvious. Is really important. And again, you can even just use emojis, for example, of what that face is going to look like. But you don't have to go into so much detail as to what the character is wearing. You don't have to draw all the lights and shadows. You don't have to do all of the, the individual hair flicks or whatever. It's not about that. It's just about trying to get the overall idea of the image down for a storyboard. One, if you are trying to find work and you are just using storyboard art, then you need to be able to showcase that you can work fast and work cleanly, but have the impact that you want. So do that, keep that in mind as you're working through it, and as you draw more and more, you will get better, you will get faster, you will know what to include, what not to include. But don't worry too much about whether the storyboard fits yet or not, especially if you're on a deadline. If you've already been, handed the job, as it were. If you're on a deadline, then it's just about the emotional impact more than anything else. And there is, by the way, there's a difference between comics and manga when it comes to that. Comics tends to focus on the action more. Manga tends to focus on the reaction more. both of them have emotional impact. Both of them have that mindset that the impact, the emotions need to be seen, but you'll notice the size of the panels change depending on whether it's action or emotional panels. So I will do close-ups of faces, for example. I will play about with the faces quite a lot. I will make bigger boxes or different shapes of panels for, you know, impact shots and whatnot, or if I'm trying to give more information, or even less information that's more impactful. So do keep that kind of stuff in mind. When I was doing this, it wasn't a clear cut, I knew what everybody looked like. And you'll notice that if you've read manga before, read comics before, they will have entire character design sessions for every character and make it all look fantastic and beautiful, just kind of sketch them out roughly, get a rough colouring in idea and whatnot. But half the time, especially when you're doing something very fast and it has to be on a deadline, you're kind of making it up on the spot. I'll be honest. And so halfway through this, you'll notice that Abuela, as in the grandmother of our main character, she changes. She's literally a different person later on in the paneling. The ones that I had sorted were Gabrielle, who's the main guy, and Camila, who's our lead girl. And that was it. The mum, the dad, we had ideas with them. Jay and I talked through them, but really we didn't have anything concrete. The triplets who show the rules eventually of this, you know, we didn't have them at all. We just kind of made them up on the spot, and you know, it works because, and ultimately, the important thing is this is Gabrielle's story. This is Gabrielle trying to show his journey, and it works for us. You know, this is what worked for us. Now, I wanted to talk really quickly about splash pages. Splash pages are one of those where you have a large impact. It is ultimately, what is it that you want to show is happening that's going to have the biggest impact on your story? That's really what splash pages are for. So whether that's a big action moment, like you know, something being smashed on the ground, whether that's a big emotional moment like a hug or something like that, you just got to think about that very quickly and carefully. You are taking up a full page worth of ink here. Be aware that you need, you know, you can add in as many details as possible, but if your image is not clear, if you don't have a perfect idea as to what's happening, then you've essentially wasted a page and ultimately wasted a picture. So just be aware of that. Another thing I want to mention is, as you look, you may have noticed that I write lots of small things here and there instead of just drawing things out. If I have an idea or several pages in succession, then I will write down what I think should be happening in each of those panels individually. Even, you know, from the script, I'll take little bits here and there, and I'll write little notes to myself on that page so that I know what to put, what I'm supposed to be adding in, so I don't forget when I'm drawing it out afterwards. But again, like I mentioned before, it's not the end of, or be all end all of the script, of the final product, sorry, is what I mean to say. Another thing I will maybe want to mention, this comes with practice, is different angles have different properties. So if you're looking at, for example, a side-on angle with a character, it tends to be that you're either in conflict with that person, or you're in deep emotional struggle with that person, or a connection with that person. So it just depends on who it is and their facial expressions, of course. When you're having like a top angle as in looking down on someone, that means that they are in a position of, or this is in general, they tend to be in a position of lower standard, or they are fighting off something, or you're trying to convey the idea that they are not in a good place right now. If you're looking from the bottom up, as in you can see from underneath that person, that means that that person has the upper hand. That means that that person tends to be in a winning position. So just play about with the different angles. You don't have to always have everything in the, you know, one plane. Do think about your angles and always kind of, I guess, play about with it. You have the time to play about with it, you might as well do it. So now that the kind of time lapse has happened, this is really what the storyboard looks like all in one. Do make sure that you read your own work through and through, because when it gets to individual pages you might think they're great, but then when you look at the overall product you think, well, actually that doesn't fit. So it's important to read it. You can check all that out on Patreon. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that time lapse of the storyboards for the competition. It's a self-contained story, so there's nothing else in it except that. We may go into doing more of this kind of stuff. I don't know here. We'll see what happens here and there, depending on how Patreon takes off and whatnot. But I do appreciate you for already joining the Patreon if you've done so, spreading the word, or if you are considering joining, please do. It's massive support to me and my family. I'll put the link again in the description as to how you can join and what you get from each thing. You get a lot, right? I'll be very frank and just say you do get loads and loads by joining Patreon. So do consider joining. You'll be able to see the full storyboard version again on the Patreon. So do check that out. I think that's it. Follow Jay. Have a look out for future things that are going to come up. I'm still working on Bounty, so just so you're aware, things are still happening with that. Story's done, just need to lay that out, and you will see that on YouTube at one point. But again, you won't get access to the full storyboard unless you're on the Patreon. So do consider joining. Anyway, that's me. As always, thank you very much, and I'll catch you at the next one.